when you look that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. Frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. A very reasonable, minimal step that can be taken. I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at.
The easy way or the hard way? That was FCC Chairman Brendan Carr in an interview last week, just before ABC announced it was pulling Jimmy Kimmel Live off the air. Now, some conservatives are starting to speak out in defense of freedom of speech in the wake of that decision. Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas is comparing Carr's comment to that of a mob boss, while Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky calls it absolutely inappropriate.
Look, I like Brendan Carr. He's a good guy. He's the chairman of the FCC. I work closely with him. But what he said there is dangerous as hell. And I got to say, he threatens it. He says, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. I think it is unbelievably dangerous for government to put itself in the position of saying, we're going to decide what speech we like and what we don't, and we're going to threaten to take you off air if we don't like what you're saying. And it might feel good right now to threaten Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
But when it is used to silence every conservative in America, we will regret it.
Absolutely inappropriate. Brendan Carr's got no business weighing in on this. But people have to also realize that despicable comments, you have the right to say them, but you don't have the right to employment. And this is television, for goodness sakes. You have to sell sponsorships. You have to sell commercials. And if you're losing money, you can be fired. But the government's got no business in it, and the FCC was wrong to weigh in. And I'll fight any attempt by the government to get involved with speech. I will fight.
Well, Senator Rand Paul is exactly right there. I mean, the marketplace can decide it. If somebody says something that will get advertisers decide not to advertise on a show, or affiliates don't want to carry it, that's fine. But if that comes after the head of the FCC does what the Wall Street Journal and Ted Cruz suggests is sort of a mafioso type threat, you can do it the easy way or we can do it the hard way, well, then suddenly that's not okay, because you have the federal government, the centralized state, putting themselves in the middle of free speech. I'm going to say, too, Ted Cruz actually says something there that I was talking to David French about earlier. As a conservative, I worry. First of all, I worry that my former party doesn't have enough conservatives in it. And in fact, they have very few if you look at the national debt exploding. But Ted Cruz is exactly right. And this is like one of the lessons, one of my main takeaways being around Washington, D.C. for 30 years. Everybody thinks that when they get elected, it's the last election, that they're going to be in power forever. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I remember 2004, George W. Bush wins. And Karl Rove talks about the permanent Republican majority. Democrats were talking about fearing a permanent Republican majority. 2 years later, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House. 2 years later, Barack Obama's elected. You have the coalition of the ascendant rising up. And this, newspapers tell us, this will shape politics for decades to come. Democrats, progressives are going to be in a dominant position for decades to come. 2 years later, the Tea Party wins. And then the Tea Party, triumphalist, talks about how they have changed the political debate forever. 2 years later, Barack Obama reelected president of the United States. And the Democrats say, this time we've got it. This time we're in power for 2 years later. Republicans have one of the biggest wins in an off-year election nationwide that they've ever had. 2 years later, Donald Trump's elected. That's supposed to change politics forever. 2 years later, Nancy Pelosi, once again, this goes on and on and on. If you go back and even look at 1964, Rick Perlman has a book about Barry Goldwater and the 1964 campaign, how the smartest people in American politics, the morning after Barry Goldwater's loss to LBJ, talked about the end of the conservative movement. It was dead. It was buried. It was over. And Barry Goldwater had done it. 2 years later, in Orange County, California, the Reagan Revolution is born, and Ronald Reagan becomes governor of California, and Republicans do extremely well in elections. And we see what happens. But there's always this back and forth. There's always this ebb and flow. And by always, I mean always. And so when you see one party doing what, or one administration doing what the Trump administration is doing, every single Republican, every single conservative should be scared out of their wits, because they know they're not going to be in power forever. What happens if some left-wing FCC chairperson comes in? What happens? And yeah, they'll say chairperson, meltdown. Some FCC chairperson comes in. What happens then? Stop setting precedents that are going to be used against you in the future, because Republicans aren't going to be in power for good. I remember, I'm sorry to go on and on, but this is such a simple truth that Ted Cruz understands in that clip. I remember during the impeachment process of Bill Clinton, I actually said to my friends and allies, I said, vote the way you're going to vote, but you better vote on the facts. You better vote on what you think the law is, because you better hold Bill Clinton to the same standard that we would want held to a Republican president. And sure enough, George W. Bush, elected president 2 years later. I don't understand the short-sightedness. I really don't. And I hope that some Republicans in the Senate can follow what Ted Cruz said and what Rand Paul said, and start finally putting up some guardrails, not to protect liberals, but to protect themselves and liberals and moderates. Because the precedents that are being set now will be used against all of us in the future, Republican, Independent, and Democrat alike. Let's bring in right now national reporter for the New York Times, Jeremy Peters, also former FCC chairman under President Obama, Tom Wheeler. Oh, my gosh. There was once a Democratic FCC chairman, and guess what? There will again be an FCC chairman. And, Mr. Chairman, I'll go to you just to say this very simple truth. You look like me. You've been around a few years. You've seen how Washington works. It is so critically important that the wrong precedents are not set. Talk about your concerns about what you've seen over the past few weeks. And I'll just say what I've been hearing from Brendan Carr over the past 6 months.
Well, Joe, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And yes, we do look alike because we both spent a lot of time in Washington, but I have gray hair. But what Brendan Carr did shouldn't really come as a surprise, because for the last several months, we've been watching him use his coercive authority to intimidate the companies that he regulates. And, I think your point is very valid about what comes around or goes around comes around. But clearly there is an agenda here. I mean, think about three things. One, and take Brendan at his word. One, he said, this isn't the last shoe to drop. We got more coming on this. Then he talked about a massive shift in the dynamics of the media ecosystem that clearly he intends to participate in. And thirdly, that shift is going to be overseen by an FCC that he said we based on permission structure that President Trump's election has provided. And I think that he's being pretty clear. He's being upfront. I mean, the interesting thing is that this permission structure, Donald Trump is very overt. If you disagree with me, we should yank your broadcast license. Brendan Carr is much more covert and saying, well, you know, we can do it the hard way or the easy way. And he exercises economic coercion on those he oversees.